again, it's Michael from Fujifilm. As of this recording, it's early autumn, and that means Halloween's not all that far away. Well, I'd like to give you a creative idea on how to make some ghostly movies. So you all know that in cinema and video there are frame rates, and you can choose the frame rate as needed to make a particular scene feel right. It could be 24 frames a second, it could be 30 frames a second, it could be 240 frames a second for super slow-mo. Well, along with that, many people think that the shutter speed necessary is supposed to be 1/2 of the frame rate. For example, that when you're shooting 24 FPS, that the shutter speed has to be at a 48th of a second. Well, that's not actually a rule. That's simply been the customary usual frame rate for about the last 100 years, but it came out of the way motion picture film cameras were engineered and designed, and the way the film had to move through the film gate at a particular rate. And it ended up being 1/48th was the typical shutter speed. But cinematographers in movies and television change shutter speeds a lot as necessary for lighting conditions or to make the scene feel different. So you can do the same thing, and you can go much faster for a really sharper image, or you can go slower to get a little bit more blur out of the picture. It's very common for a lot of cameras to allow you to go down to, say, a 15th of a second or maybe a 10th when shooting at 24 frames per second, but some don't. Our own Fujifilm X-T200, for example, will not allow you to go below a 24th of a second when shooting at 24 FPS. But some cameras, like the Fujifilm X-T3, X-T4, GFX100, will actually let you go all the way down to 1/4 of a second shutter speed. That's 0.25 of a second shutter speed. And this is actually quite a bit of a rarity in cameras like this. So now you may be thinking, wait a minute, the math doesn't make sense. At 1/4 of a second, I'm not getting the right number of frames in the 24 FPS timeline. Well, that's where the camera processor comes into play. So the camera processor very cleverly duplicates frames as necessary to give you 24 slices in 1 second, so it plays back at the normal rate instead of it feeling like some kind of a time lapse. So what can you get by shooting, say, at a shutter speed of 1/8 of a second or 1/4 of a second? Well, when the camera is moving, it gives the camera a very disoriented, eerie kind of a floating feeling about it, right? When you're zooming in and out, it makes the image feel, again, disjointed and almost hallucinogenic, like the person that is the point of view from the camera is having some kind of a difficult time orienting themselves. But also when you're shooting people, it can give you some really cool motion blur and trails and smeary effects that's really good for dance maybe or sports. And I've actually found it to be really handy when shooting music videos. So give slow shutter speed a try and make yourself some fun, creative videos with it. Thanks for joining me. See you next time.